Welcome. It's great to see you or imagine you. Jonathan Foust here. Really glad you're here for this short meditation and Dharma talk. A few announcements before we launch in here. First of all, I would like to acknowledge our producers, Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo, for their amazing work. Thank you so much. Also to our mindful movement teachers and to our mindful dialogue teachers who are kind of off for the summer. So the full experience, if you're so drawn, at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, you can take part in a mindful movement class designed to kind of help you release tensions, kind of arrive in time for the meditation at 7:30. That's 6:30 Eastern Standard. This is 7:30 Eastern Standard. And then afterward, usually we have mindful dialogue, but we are giving Ray and Tara the summer off. So please feel free to avail yourself. Those links are on my Facebook page and my website. Thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for their tremendous support and all they do to make all this stuff available. Shout out to my friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington in Arlington, Virginia. And let's see, a couple other things, the standard things. I have a newsletter. Monthly, I share a compendium of my talks and my best photos for the month. And there's also a weekly, if you like, just to get a little advance of what's coming up. And this is all offered free. No one's denied access to these practices. That's the intention. If you're inspired to support me and also to support the mindful movement teachers, thank you so much. It truly, truly does make a difference. Okay, so we are going to meditate for the next 13 minutes. And this becomes a really interesting challenge. How quickly can you shift from forward focus, past review, anything but here and now, to being more and more present? I find it really helpful to do some movement, some concentration to arrive, and then open into presence. So if you like, reach your arms up overhead, stretch up through the left side, the right side, let out any sounds. Oh, you're muted. I'm not. And we'll do the old classic here. If you like, bring your elbows so they're parallel to your shoulders, palms facing in. Actively draw your shoulder blades close together. Begin to slow down and deepen your breath. As you breathe in, sense if you can draw the breath up under your collarbones. And as you exhale, draw the navel in toward the spine, so you're exhaling all the air out of your lungs. Holding this contraction between the shoulder blades, very, very powerful. What's happening here is you're taking the slack out of muscles that get lengthened from slumping, and you're lengthening the muscles that get chronically shortened from slumping. So 2 more breaths. Fill the lungs with air. And then reach your arms up once again, stretch out to the left side and the right side. And you can very slowly now begin to release your hands down toward your lap. And close your eyes. Relax and feel. Over the next 3 exhalations, how much more can you soften and relax and feel and let go? Sensing this transition from contraction to relaxation. You might find it helpful for a short period of time here to turn your attention to your breath and take the next 2 minutes for willful breathing. So you're inhaling to the count of 4 or 5 or maybe even 6, then matching the length of the inhalation with the length of the exhalation, exhaling to 4 or 5 or 6. Let your breath be smooth. Let your breath be full and rich. And let your breath be deep. Feel the effect re-arriving in the here and now. Feel free to continue with this technique if you're finding it helpful. It's a very powerful way of gathering attention. But if you like, you might now relax any control of your breath. Let the breath be free flowing and sense if you can maintain this sense of intimate connection with the experience of the breath on the inside. And as you do so, let's explore what it's like to deepen the sense of intimacy in the here and now, sensing from the inside out what it's like to soften and relax. Beginning with a forehead, you might imagine your forehead smooth. And sense, if you can, the muscles around the eyes. You might feel, if you can, this sense of all expression melting away from your face, all the micro expressions softening, the face becoming smooth like the face of a marble statue. Could you soften the inside of your mouth, relaxing, in particular the tongue? Is it possible to feel your jaw softening, just relaxing away from the skull? Now you might feel or imagine your arms like heavy drapes, just hanging from your shoulders, and sense from the inside out, from the shoulders down through the elbows. The elbows down through the wrists. Awareness flowing into the palms, sensing from the inside out the thumbs and fingers, backs of the hands. And you may notice the more you soften your palms, the more intimately you might be able to feel any sense of pulse or tingling or vibration. Could you soften through the lower back and the buttocks and the belly? And could you feel the weight and the volume of your legs? Now sensing from the inside out the tops of the feet and the toes, and the soles of the feet and the heels. And is there anything right now that could relax or soften or let go? Is there anything that could relax or soften or let go even more than that? And for these next few minutes, you might direct your attention to perhaps the sense of the breath on the inside, or the sounds around you, or maybe even this feeling in the palms. And whatever anchor you choose, breath or sound or feeling, let this be your primary focus. When the mind drifts away, notice how gently you can invite it back. You might notice as you again relax and re-arrive at the point of your anchor of breath or sound or feeling, a little distinction in your practice with the object of your focus and the sense of the periphery or the background. Noticing what's happening as it's happening, but also noticing all that's changing, and even the sense of who you are as the meditator. For this next minute or so, notice if you can let things be just as they are. How much more could you relax? How much more could you soften? You might now begin to gently deepen your breath. Notice the sounds around you, the sense of the air touching the skin. Let your body begin to move and stretch. Take some time to adjust your posture in any way that feels really good for you. We're going to very gently transition to the talk, so feel free to open your eyes or remain with them closed just a few minutes about what's coming next. The title of this talk is To Live a Life of No Regrets. It's an exploration around what it means to live your life with a clear conscience. You'll learn how regret is a natural part of the human experience and how powerful it can be to slow down and address your regrets. And also to kind of refresh the sense of the guidelines that you want to live by, to ensure that you not only live your life as fully as possible, but at the end of this life, that you can look back feeling clear and open. Please enjoy the following talk. Many, many blessings.
A guy goes into a bookstore, goes up to the counter and says, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the self-help section is?" And the person at the desk looks at him and says, "Wouldn't that defeat the purpose?" Supposedly that's a true story. I wonder if the person regretted saying that. Probably not. But I do want to talk a little bit about the theme of regret. This is the time of year when we have a tendency to kind of look back over what we accomplished and what we didn't accomplish. And I do my annual year in review, which I've been doing for a number of years. And I get to look back at all the stuff I said I would do that I didn't get to, which sometimes has some regret to it. What I'd like to talk about is when you begin to turn your attention to this topic of regret, for many of us, we recognize that we live with regret. I mean, regret is part of the human experience. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how to be with that, how to heal regret. And as well to talk about some of the strategies for moving forward in life. You know, all great traditions have guidelines, how to get the most out of your life. And of course, different traditions say different things, but it's up to each of us to find out, how do I want to live? What are the rules I'm going to live by? And I'd like to talk finally a little bit about how to move forward in life to live as regret-free as possible at the end of your life. When I was in high school, I had the great fortune to go to a boarding school from age 13 on. And my roommate one year was... his name was Gil Hines. He was from South Philly, and we were best friends. And he traveled with my family once, and I went down to his family in South Carolina once, and we got so we could do our accents perfectly. You know, I could do him, and he could do me. He's an African American guy, and we always had fun mixing it up. But there would be times I would come back into the room, I'd say, "Damn, what's your shit doing on my bed?" And he'd jump up and say, "Oh gosh, let me clean it up." And we fell out of touch, as happens. And this was a number of years ago. I got an email from him just saying he'd like to connect. And we emailed back and forth a little bit. And I was really, really busy. And then I kind of let it go. And then he called me. And I didn't return the call. And then I found out that he had been dying of cancer. And sitting with that regret of someone who had been such a dear friend and being too busy to respond was something that I really sat with and still sit with for a long time. Regret is a big part of life, and you may know there's a beautiful book written about the regrets of the dying. And the number one regret of the dying is I wasn't true to myself. And some others, I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I didn't hold back my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with friends. I wish I had cared less about what other people think of me. I wish I didn't worry so much. I wish I had taken better care of myself. I wish I didn't take life for granted. And I wish I lived more in the now. And you can feel the regret in that, like the deep regret. How is it that we fall out of living a life we want to live and fall into the trance of being someone who's on their way somewhere or missing like the deepest intuitive callings that we have. A recent study on regret, 18% of people regret past romance or lost love, 16% family-related, education 13%, finance, parenting 13 and 10%. Half of our regrets are connected to our relationships. And it's interesting how when you look at regret, there are really two kinds of regret. One is the regret for the things we did but wish we hadn't done. That's like choosing a practical and safe job rather than the one you are called to, or being unskillful in taking care of your body, marrying someone who was safe but not enlivening, choosing a job that gave you more money but less time to be with family, joining a group of friends that you know isn't really good for you. So those are the actions you take that you regret. But then there are all the things we didn't do that we could have done. And the list here tends to be longer. And again, in some of the interviews, the people are saying, not standing up to the bullies in my life, not staying in touch with good friends from childhood, not putting my phone away, breaking up a relationship with someone that I really loved, not applying for the job that I really wanted, not going on more trips with family and friends, not spending more time with kids, not burying the hatchet with a family member, not trusting the voice in the back of my head, not having the courage to speak at a funeral, not visiting a friend before he died, not learning another language. It's much, much harder to heal the regrets of inaction. And so the regrets of inaction, of not taking the next step, possibly missing out on something, these are the deepest regrets that we carry inside. A great quote from Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which I am. Implicit here is karma, action and reaction. What did we miss? That's where the regret is. What did I miss by not going a little further, taking that risk? So when we begin to recognize our inactions or our unskillful actions, how do we be with that? There's a story from the Buddhist time, one of the classic stories of a young man who was really smart and kind of studying the Dharma, and the people who were studying with were jealous of him, and they turned their teacher against him. And so he went from this bright prodigy to the other side, where he became a thief, and he became kind of a wicked person. Created a huge amount of suffering, everywhere he went. And then the story is that he encountered these teachings, these teachings of liberation, and they touched him very deeply. And he started to follow the teachings and became a monk and became a renunciate, gave away everything to practice the teachings full time. And when the monks would go out on alms rounds asking for food, some people in the village recognized him, people who had been harmed by him, and he was, beaten terribly. But he recognized the karma of his past actions and sort of endured those beatings as part of like a purification process. And what happens when we really encounter our regrets and we investigate our regrets, it requires that we really feel the pain of that regret. And we feel it in a way that we can really get it, which can inform us how we want to move into the future. And again, as I think of these talks, my mind always goes there. And so, of course, I've been surfacing all kinds of regrets all week. But I was reminded once, when I lived in the ashram, I did a lot of fundraising. And I would give a lot of talks about the work we were doing and encouraging people to give. This is way, way back in the AIDS crisis when no one really knew what it was. And there was this young guy who asked to talk to me after one of my talks. And I realized he just needed to talk. And I could tell he wasn't well. And at that time, because we had a large program center with thousands of people coming, there was a decision in the organization that if anyone had AIDS, they were not allowed to be in our facility because, we didn't know how infectious it was at that time. And so every week he would come and he would just talk and talk and talk. And I could tell he needed to talk. And then he told me that he had AIDS, and he told me about, his lifestyle, and I could tell there was really no one who could really listen. But I was conflicted because I was told that he couldn't be here. And so I elected not to tell anyone in the organization because it seemed so important for him to be there. And so he would come from time to time, and then he would come less. And then he stopped coming. And again, at a very, very busy time in my life, I realized that I never followed up. I never tracked him down. And again, just that sense of regret, that again, I got swept away by the busyness of my life. And here was someone who was very present in my life and then drifted away. And I realized how easy it was just to stay busy. But the challenge was to really feel that, to kind of feel my own insensitivity, my own unwillingness to really, really deeply feel what he was going through at the end of his life, and my lack of following up. But what arose from that was a very, very deep intention to be more sensitive in the future, to really see when people are suffering, to slow myself down, to have that intention, to slow down and be more present. There's a wonderful phrase. Of course, when there is regret, there's some lack of forgiveness toward ourselves. And the phrases go like this: I allow myself to be imperfect. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. If I cannot forgive myself now, may I forgive myself sometime in the future. And I found great healing in those words. And I thought we might just do a short reflection. If you like, you can close your eyes. And we're just going to do just a little reflection on something where you may feel some regret in your life. And you might just take a few moments and just sense, is there just one thing that comes forward as you sit for this brief meditation? You might elect not to take on the massive regret you're holding if it feels like it's too much. But something that you feel sorry for. And you might take a moment to close your eyes, and it can be helpful to draw it a little bit closer. If you can create a representative image, a still image or a moving image that represents this issue. It's helpful to sense perhaps if there are any words or sounds or tone of voice that you associate with this. And if it feels okay, if it feels safe, you might begin to sense what it feels like inside as you think about this. Can you locate that feeling on the inside? And the first step is to let it know you see it. And can you be with it for a little while? And is it possible to offer this some kind of loving presence? Some empathy or kindness or compassion? Can you forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now? And you might reflect on these phrases, either just repeating them internally or letting them kind of wash through. I allow myself to be imperfect. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. I forgive myself. If I cannot forgive myself now, may I forgive myself sometime in the future. And you might just sense in your own way, if you could forgive yourself and if you were forgiven, what might that feel like? What might that be like inside? If in your regret you may have harmed another, you might explore the following phrases. Please allow me to be imperfect. Please allow me to make mistakes. Please allow me to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. If you cannot forgive me now, please try to forgive me sometime in the future. And if you were forgiven, just imagine or feel what that would feel like. If you like, you can deepen the breath. And if you like, you can open the eyes so you can remain with them closed. Quite often we go through life accumulating regrets without taking the time to really let them heal. And I've certainly met a lot of people in my life who haven't. And as people age, you can see just how deeply those regrets inform us through life. So part of the practice is the courage to name it and to draw it forward and to feel it and explore what it needs, which quite often is some form of forgiveness. And again, there's that sense of looking back and forgiving yourself for not knowing what you know now. It's only when we really feel the hurt, like the ouch in our regrets, that we can make choices that can be more conscious, that are more in alignment with where we want to be. And one of the gifts of exploring regret is how sensitized the heart becomes when we recognize the harm we've done to ourselves or others through our fear or our need to control or our ignorance. There can be, out of that, kind of a rebirth of a fresh intention. The story that I find so powerful, I come back to the story again and again. It's a story about the Dalai Lama. And he was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter asked him if he had any regrets in life. And the Dalai Lama said, absolutely. And the reporter said, can you tell me of one? And the Dalai Lama said that when he was a young man, first installed in this role as the Dalai Lama, an older monk came to him asking permission to do these spiritual practices that were very rigorous. They're really designed for a much younger man. And the Dalai Lama told him that no, he shouldn't do those. He should continue doing the practice he was doing because they were more suited to being an older man. And the Dalai Lama said he found out years ago that this monk had committed suicide in the belief that he'd pick up a younger man's bodies to continue doing those practices. And the reporter said, well, when you found that out, how did you feel? And the Dalai Lama said, just horrible regret, and so much self-recrimination and so much judgment. And the reporter asked him, well, how did you make that go away? And the Dalai Lama looked at him incredulously and he said, I didn't. It's still there. It's a question of how I hold it. It's a question now of how I relate to it. And I love that story. Because when I look back at my regrets, the things I really wish I had done differently, they're still there. But if I can really feel them and sense, given that, how do I want to live forward? What's my intention in living forward? There can be real clarity, clarity where there wasn't before. When I was about age, maybe 6 or 7, I first ran across the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I remember hearing that, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I remember being so struck by the beauty of that, the perfection of that. And that sense of what if everyone lived that way? What an ideal world it would be. I remember that so clearly, being struck by that. And so many of the great world traditions, some of them have the golden rule kind of as their basis, but they all have guidelines. All great traditions have as their foundation these ethical guidelines on how to live. Things to avoid and things to practice. So we have the 10 Commandments, of course, in Christianity. In Islam, there's a whole code of conduct. In yoga philosophy, they basically break down what's equivalent to the 10 Commandments into 5 observances and 5 restraints. The things you do, they're going to cultivate a more wholesome state, and the things you don't do because they're going to pull you away from what might be most important in your life. And in the Buddhist tradition, we have sila, which are sometimes referred to as the precepts. And these are five essential guidelines on how to cultivate a more wholesome life. But what's interesting is when you look at these guidelines, they're wide open to interpretation. So one of them, the first one says, to refrain from taking life, from killing any creature. For some, that's non-harming and being vegan. Some traditions, in some Buddhist traditions, it's like, well, just don't be the person doing the killing. And then in some traditions, they say, be grateful for what you have. So you can kind of see the span. Another precept in the Buddhist tradition is to refrain from taking what is not freely given. Basically, don't steal. And again, we have a span. Some people interpret that as living a life of renunciation. Don't own anything. As we used to say in the ashram, no car problems. For others, it's live simply. Live as simply on the earth as you can. And for others, it's simply remember that all things are impermanent. There's a story of how the Buddha, a very wealthy man, one of the benefactors of the Buddha, said, look, I don't want to give my stuff away. I like my stuff. Can I still live this life and wake up to reality, wake up to truth without giving it all away? And the Buddha reportedly said, yes, you can, but it's very challenging. But you have to remember that everything will one day fall away. So again, one way is to live this life with real gratitude, knowing that whatever you have one day will disappear. Another precept is to refrain from misuse of the senses in sexual misconduct and overindulging into the senses because of the harm that we can do through sexual misconduct. And again, different traditions say different things. Some say, well, that means we need to be celibate. Others say, well, no, we just need to be more mindful, be very, very aware of how you use your energy through your speech and your thoughts and your actions. Other traditions say, well, actually, sexuality is a spiritual practice, so engage into it mindfully. It's actually a tool for liberation, like the Tantra practices. Another precept is to refrain from wrong speech, to refrain from lying, to refrain from gossip. That's interpreted by some as, okay, that means silence. Don't speak. And for others, it's around, again, being mindful. To ask yourself at all times, the acronym of WAIT, why am I talking? Is what I'm saying helpful? Is what I'm saying true? Is what I'm saying kind? Is what I'm saying something the other person can hear? To hold that in the foreground of your awareness in all of your relationships. And the fifth precept is to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. For some, that's abstinence. For some, that's being mindful in usage. And for some, it's actually, there are some substances that are mind expanding that can be very, very powerful and actually can awaken consciousness. So that's part of the equation as well. All the studies now psilocybin and MDMA and LSD and its effect on consciousness. And there's some very, very powerful cutting edge stuff happening right now. So the bottom line is, here are all these guidelines with an infinite number of interpretations. And what that leaves you with is, what are the rules that you want to live by? What are the precepts by which you will steer your own boat in order so that at the end of your life, you look back with minimal regret? One of the things I so enjoy about Buddhist practice is that there are, certainly you'll find some traditions that will tell you precisely what to do and not to do. But to me, in its own pure form, the Buddha allegedly said, you must take responsibility for your own awakening. Be a light unto yourself. And that means all you can do is sense what is true for you. Practice diligently and keep evaluating how you're doing. So then the question becomes, as we name regrets, as we make room for them, as we heal them, as we forgive ourselves and forgive others, the question really comes down to is, how do you want to live forward? How do you want to live the rest of your life, knowing that your time is not guaranteed? And that becomes a very powerful personal question, but it's also a very powerful relational question. I think the distilled conversation in an intimate relationship is, this is what I'm called to in my life. This is what lights me up. This is how I want to live my life, knowing my days are not guaranteed. How do you want to live your life? What lights you up? And where in here is our relationship? How do we support each other? So some people have a bucket list, things you want to do. Maybe you've heard that talk. I think Obama gave a talk. He said how some people have a bucket list, and he has another list, and the word starts with F. What are the things you're not going to do? What are the things you're going to let fall away? So I thought we might do a reflection here as we get toward the end of this talk. There's this beautiful reflection on, sometimes it's called the rocking chair test. When you're 102 years old, sitting on your rocker on the back porch, looking back, what will have been most important in your life? So if you like, you can close your eyes. And we'll take a few moments here just to settle. You might slow down and deepen your breath. And again, relax the face and the tongue, the lips, the belly. One of the more powerful practices I run across to help inform my intention is to reflect on how I want to feel at the end. And you might choose a time in the future. Maybe since we're here at the new year, maybe it's 1 year from now. Or you might even just imagine as you're coming into your last breaths. Find a time in the future. And you might ask yourself, how do I want to feel at this time? Slow down, deepen your breath. Take some time to investigate this. How do you want to feel? And you might, to bring it a little more alive, is take that feeling inside and imagine you could express it on your face. What information does this have for you? And if that version of you in the future could offer you some advice now, what would it say? What does it want you to know? And there are three things that you might reflect on. If you were to live a life cultivating that feeling, what attitude adjustment would be required? What behaviors would be required? And what kind of support would you need? You might now begin to slow down and deepen your breath once again. And again, just make contact with how you would like to feel. And you might inquire if that feeling is not here right now in some form. As you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And if you like, you can open your eyes. I found in my experience and in my practice that naming your regrets takes a tremendous amount of courage, because there's always an underbelly of really deep feelings there. Feelings of disappointment, of shame, and on and on and on. But when we reflect on the inherent lessons in those regrets and how we want to move forward, it can be quite empowering. One regret that I carry is I grew up on a farm, and I worked on farms, and all through college I worked on a farm, managing a 1,000-acre farm, and out in the Midwest. And I was the livestock manager. We had 500 hogs. And initially I was really excited, 125 little piglets every 4 months. And I was really good at taking care of them. And then I was tasked with driving the barrows, once they'd grown out to 250 pounds, taking them to market. And the absolute horror of the sounds of these animals I had cared for, being stuck with electrodes, and the screams in the slaughterhouse of these terrified animals. It was one of those moments of kind of the shock of what I was participating in, and how many years I had actively participated in that. And I realized how easily I could just stay stuck in that regret. But it's deeply informed my choices, eating a plant-based diet and recognizing, animals that don't have a voice, I have the opportunity to be a voice for them. And there's something about whatever activism I have there, it's not so much informed by anger, although at times there's frustration and anger there. But it's really informed by a deep sense of what that moment of what that recognition felt like inside. So I really feel there are tremendous opportunities that arise from taking time to sit with your regrets and to really ask yourself, what do you know now that you did not know then? And how can you move forward in a way that feels wholesome and alive? And just to close with these lines from Steve Jobs. He didn't waste time in his words. He said, "Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Everything else is secondary." So may that be so for all of us.